Now we shall talk about the most important connective in this mathematical logic, which is called as implication. Okay, so in this subject this is the most important topic. So implication is a connective which is used to make compound statements from simple statements, right? So if we have two propositions or two statements, let us say P and Q, what do I mean by implication is this. So if you have two statements like this, P and Q, P, Q, then if I use the connective P implies Q, it is also called as P implies Q. Now when I have two statements here or two propositions here, and when I use this connective, then the resulting statement is called as a conditional statement or simply implication. So this is sometimes called as implication. Actually this connective is called as implication, but then the entire compound statement which is going to be followed is also called as implication simply, right? Or sometimes they will call it as conditional statement. P implies Q. So what you should know about this one is, if the truth values are like this, true true, true false, false true, false false, it is going to be true false, true true, right? So if the statement P and Q both are true, then the truth value of this conditional statement is going to be true. If the statement P and Q, if the statement P is false, then irrespective of what is there for Q, it is always true. And if the statement Q is false when P is true, this is the only case when P implies Q is going to be false. You have to remember this table, by heart this table, whatever you do, you have to do it. And there are various names when you write P implies Q. There are various names to call P and Q. Generally P is called as hypothesis and Q is called as conclusion. If it is confusing, hypothesis and conclusion, you need not remember it. They might not ask you the definitions, but these are the most common names. The only important thing is you have to remember this. Okay, so let's take an example and see how questions can be framed in this concept. Let's take an example like this. Let us say P is a statement. You get 60 marks in GATE. Right? And Q is a statement. You will go to IITs. Okay. Now, what is the meaning of P implies Q in this case is, if you get 60 marks in GATE, then you will go to IITs. Okay, so let us assume that you got 60 marks in GATE. So let us say this is true, and you got a seat in IITs. Let us say this one is true. If both of them are true, then what is P implies Q? If both of them are true, P implies Q is true. Let us say you got 60 marks in GATE, but you didn't go to IIT, right? Then this is true and this is false, and therefore the entire statement P implies Q is false. Let us say you didn't get 60 marks but you got into IITs, then also P implies Q is true. You didn't get 60 marks and so you didn't go to IITs, then also this is true. So there it is really difficult to understand it that way. So first thing you have to observe is, this P implies Q, this conditional statement is very different from the English. So first of all, you have to understand that we are not dealing with the normal language. Even though we have used this language if and then, it is not the normal language. It is very different from that. So remove from your mind that we are dealing with English language. Even though we are using English language, it is not actually English language, it's a different language. Okay, so what does it mean? This statement P implies Q, or this entire statement when I read it will have a different meaning in English and it will have a different meaning in our logic. So what is its meaning in English? If you just think about it in English terms, what is its meaning? If you get 60 marks in GATE, then you will go to IITs, right? So what does it generally mean? If you get 60 marks, you will go. It also means that in English, if you don't get 60 marks, then you cannot go into IITs. That is what it means in English. But in logic, it is not what they actually mean. So in logic, what it means is, this is an independent statement and this is an independent statement and both are not related. That is what is in logic. So which means, getting 60 marks is an independent statement and getting this one, going into IIT, is an independent statement, and both of them can be true or false, and the truth value of P implies Q will depend on what are the values of this depending on this table. Got it? So it is not English language, right? So if you have to understand it, what I can say is, this statement in logic says that if this particular statement is true, and if this particular statement is true, then the truth value of this statement is true. Also, if this particular statement is known to be false, then irrespective of what happens here, it is going to be true. So what does it mean? It says that only thing that it says in logic is, if this particular thing happens and if this particular thing doesn't happen, then it is false. In all the other cases, it is true. Right? It might be a bit confusing, but then once you understand these simple things, it will be very easy to solve the questions, right? So I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So first thing is, don't think that it is normal English language, right? And second thing is, in simple words, if I have to tell you, you can understand it this way. If you get 60 marks in GATE, then you can go to IITs. It also says that even if you don't get 60 marks in GATE, then also you can go into IITs through some other means. But in English, it says that if you don't get 60 marks, you cannot go into IITs. But in propositional logic, it says that if you don't get 60 marks, then also you can go into IITs by some other ways. Got it? Depending on some other factors, right? And second thing is, there may not be any connection between these two, right? So I'll tell you one more thing. Let us say P is a statement. Narendra Singh Modi is PM. Narendra Modi is PM of India. Okay. So if Modi is the PM of India, let us say Q is a statement. You will get into IITs, right? Now, if I write P implies Q, it is meaningless in English, isn't it? If Narendra Singh Modi is PM of India, then you will get into IITs is completely meaningless. But coming to this logic, it is meaningful, right? And depending on what are the truth values of this, you can decide about what happens to this. For example, what about Narendra Modi is PM of India? Let us say this is true, right? And what about this? You will get into IITs. That depends. Let us say it also happened, right? Then what is the truth value of P implies Q? P implies Q truth value is true. Therefore, don't try to use your normal English. Just try to treat them as independent statements. Got it? Now let us say Narendra Modi is PM of India is true now. Okay, and you didn't get into IITs. This happened to be false. Then what about the truth value of this? Truth value of this one is false, because true false is going to be false. Got it? Now let us say Narendra Modi is not PM of India. Let us say, in the next elections he changed, and this statement, this one happened to be false. Now if this one happened to be false, irrespective of what happens to this statement, P implies Q will always be true. Are you getting this? The reason is, if P is false, it is always going to be true, right? Let's take one more example. So what should you understand here is, P and Q need not be related. P and Q have to be treated as independent statements, and depending on the truth value of P and Q, we have to decide about the truth value of P implies Q. And it is not like English language. Moreover, it is not like programming language also. In programming language too, we have if and then statements, if else statements. That is completely different. It is completely different. There is no relation between this mathematical logic and any of the other usages of if and then, right? And the second thing is there need not be any relationship between. It is not a kind of cause and effect. In English, when we use it, it is a kind of cause and effect. If you hit a wall, if you hit a wall, then you might get pain. That there is a cause and there is an effect, right? But in this language, it need not be so. Two statements need not be cause and effect. Let's see one more example. Let us say P is today is Monday. Q is 2 into 5 equal to 10, right? Now, what happens to P implies Q? See this. Today is Monday. It will be true on Monday and false on some other days. Now, what about Q? It is always going to be true, isn't it? Q is always going to be true, and P may be true or false. So, what are the two cases you are going to see? Q is always going to be true, which means this and this, right? So you can observe that when Q is true, irrespective of what happens to P, the result is always going to be true, which means this particular statement P implies Q is always true. Always true. And a statement which is always true is also called as tautology. Tautology. So what is the meaning of this one is, this particular statement P implies Q is always going to be true, whatever you do, right? So this particular statement, irrespective of what day it is, any day if you speak about it, it is going to be true. Actually, if you see it, there will be no meaning. You'll never use such a statement in English. If you try to convert it and think of it like an English language, you'll be amazed to see this. If today is Monday, then 2 into 5 equal to 10. It is actually meaningless, isn't it? What is the relationship between Monday and this multiplication? But then it makes sense in mathematical logic, and also it is true, it is always true. It is a tautology, right? And let us say it is given as 2 into 5 equal to 20, right? Then what happens? This is false. Okay, now this statement happens to be false, and P can be true or false. Let us say today is actually Monday. Then if this statement is true, then P implies Q is going to be false, which means this particular statement, if today is Monday, then 2 into 5 equal to 20 is actually true on Monday. It doesn't make sense, isn't it? If today is Monday, then 2 into 5 equal to 20, which means can it be 20 on Mondays and not 10 on other days? That doesn't make sense, but then it makes perfect sense in mathematical logic. So you have to get used to this language. It is a complete different language, and it doesn't make sense to you in a normal way. But later, when we do examples on this, it will be clear why it will be used later. Okay. So as of now, you try to get used to this. So again, see this. Now, what is the meaning of this? If today is Monday, then 2 into 5 equal to 20. If this one is true, this one is false, then the entire thing is false, which means this P implies Q. P implies Q in this case will be false on Monday, right? Let us say today is not Monday, today is some other day, Tuesday or some other day. Then what happens to this? This one is false. Now this one is false and this one is false, and what about false? It is true. Funny, right? Which means the same statement P implies Q is actually true on any other weekday other than Monday. Are you getting this? It is perfectly irrational. You don't find actually any logic in the logic, right? But later you'll understand why it is used. So for now, you just try to get used to this terminology, and even though it is like this, you just follow this for some time. Maybe after some few examples you will understand where it is used and how it is used, right? So it is very different from what you know or what you think about it in English. Now there are various ways we can express this implication. If you have P and Q, there are various ways they can express the same P implies Q in mathematical logic, right? So these are all the ways. If P then Q, this is the normal thing that we have been using. So what is it? If you take any example like P and Q, you can get if you get 60 marks, then you go into IITs. If P is getting 60 marks and Q is going into IITs, then if you get 60 marks in GATE, then you go into IITs, right? If P comma Q, then what is it? If you get 60 marks, go to IIT. You will go to IIT. Then P is sufficient for Q. Then what does it mean? If you getting 60 marks in GATE is sufficient to go to IITs, right? Q if P, you will get into IITs if you get 60 marks in GATE. Q when P, you will get into IITs when you get 60 marks in GATE. A necessary condition for getting 60 marks in GATE is going into IITs. It does not make sense. Till here all these notations are making sense, but if you think about it logically, it may not make sense. But you have to remember that it is one way of expressing P implies Q. What is it? A necessary condition for getting 60 marks in GATE is getting into IITs. You may not be able to relate it, or you will not be able to understand it, but this is one of the way of expressing it in logic. Remember that. Q unless not P, you will get into IITs unless you don't get 60 marks in GATE. Makes sense. P implies Q. Getting 60 marks in GATE implies getting into IITs. P only if Q. Getting 60 marks in GATE only if you go to IITs. Doesn't make sense, but still it is a notation which is used. Now why am I saying all this is, in exam they might not say what is P, what is Q. Instead they will give you one statement using any of these notations, and you are supposed to identify what is P and what is Q in that, and then you are supposed to modify the statement. They will ask you what is contrapositive, what is inverse, what is converse. We'll get back to that question. Okay. Next one is a sufficient condition for Q is P. So what does it mean? A sufficient condition for getting into IITs is getting 60 marks in GATE. This is the best possible statement about conditional this one. So what does it mean? A sufficient condition, which means this is one of the conditions. Therefore you will be able to get into IITs even because of some other factors. Let us say suddenly people have introduced some other exam through which they are also taking people into IITs. Then what happens? GATE will become one of the sufficient conditions, and there may be many conditions. And next one is Q whenever P. So what does it mean? You will get into IITs whenever you get 60 marks. That is how this statement can be written. Now whenever you get any such statement, you should be able to derive that, oh, Q is this and P is this. If you are not able to identify what is P and what is Q, you will not able to answer the question. If you have to identify what is P and what is Q, you should know what are all the ways they might express P implies Q in. Got it? And next one is Q is necessary for P. So see this, getting into IITs is necessary for getting 60 marks in GATE exam. Doesn't make sense at all, but they might give you this. And Q follows from P. What does it mean? Getting into IITs follows from getting 60 marks in GATE. Doesn't make sense again, but they might give you statements in any of these forms, and you have to identify what is P and Q. Then only you can answer the questions. Like I'll give you the questions, okay, in the next video. Fine. Now what are the questions possible on this? We shall see.
Hi, if you are planning to do masters, then doing masters abroad is better than doing masters in India. I'll give you all the reasons. So, first reason is, out of 1 lakh students who take GATE every year, there are only 500 seats in old IITs. So all the IITs put together have an acceptance rate of 0.5%, and IITs, universities better than IITs, they have very good acceptance rate like 30%, 40%, but all the IITs put together have an acceptance rate of 0.5%. And if you are working hard to get into IIT Bombay's ranking is 177 and IIT Roorkee's ranking is 400. If you are happy to get into IIT Roorkee, then getting into university is better than IIT Roorkee is easier compared to getting into IIT Roorkee. And looking at the salaries for computer science, for software jobs, if you have done your masters in computer science in US, the salaries are ranging from 80 lakhs per year to 1.2 crore per year. So even if you take an average of 1 crore per year, your savings will be much higher than the salaries in India. After taxes and your cost of living, you can easily save 40 to 50 lakhs per year. And in India, the maximum jobs that you get is around 30 lakhs. So your savings will be much greater than the salaries in India. And these are all the services that we provide. University shortlisting. So depending on your profile, we will shortlist what are the universities that you have to apply, and statement of purpose building, and then LOR guidance, and GRE and English test assistance, and education loan assistance. So you don't have to have any collateral, which means without any security, now you can get education loan. Getting education loan is very simple these days, and whatever the amount of fee that you have a range of universities. You can apply for 10 lakh universities, 20 lakh universities, or 50 lakh universities, but whatever it is, you are going to get complete education loan, and you can pay off your education loan in 1 year after you get a job. And then we do visa assistance, mock visa interviews, and then connecting with the university alumni. So now you might ask why we should join Game of Visas. So the answer is, we have 90% success rate, 99% success rate. And these are all the destinations that we guide the students to. So we guide students to any country that you want to go. So now it is not just USA. We guide to UK, Germany, Australia, Canada. So we guide students to all the countries. We work with all the destinations. And if you are interested in going abroad, you have to just drop us a message on this WhatsApp number 9494 555 454. Okay, thank you.